Thank you everyone for joining this particular session. I don't know about you, I'm still traumatized after the cybersecurity exercise, and that's not just the acting. I think it was, no, well done, it was really good. It separates out the introverts from the extroverts for those willing to come up, so well done. We've got a brilliant session coming up next. Welcome to the library. Not a single book on site. This is our digital future, folks. Let's just assume it's all part of a large language model. And let me turn to our fabulous panel to discuss innovation in data. And starting at the end, Laura, who's Chief Analyst and Director of Data Science at 10 Downing Street. We're going to hear from you in a second.
Apologies to anyone who's already heard quite enough of me already earlier today. For anyone that didn't catch earlier, I'm the Director of Data Science in Downing Street. I run a team of about 23 data scientists, and we also have about 10 sort of software developers in a skunkworks that are trying to speed up digital innovation in government. My team came about I joined in September 2020, and it came around shortly before that. As with so much digital and data transformation across the world because of COVID. So Downing Street prior to that was very much a place that was dominated, as you would expect, by policymakers, both in the civil service and the political special advisors. And Downing Street has a much higher percentage of special advisors than the rest of government. And because of the success, really, of the COVID data, and of course a lot of data came out of the Office of National Statistics and out of the NHS and related organisations, and we went from being in an environment where it's quite difficult to get hold of and kept in pockets to an environment where we needed to get it very quickly from one place to another, and ideally in an automated way. Ministers started getting used to looking at data dashboards every day or, many times a day to see what was going on, and it became apparent how important it was to have up-to-date, accurate information to try and make your decisions on. And I think more than that, we started moving into a world where people were modelling, trying to predict outcomes, and doing their best to sort of do scenario planning in a data and evidence-based way. So at that point, the powers that were at the time decided what we needed to do was we needed to get real data expertise into Downing Street itself. And that was a radical break from the norm. It wasn't necessarily wildly well received by everybody. Some people were quite receptive, but we did, when we first started, we'd come in, we'd look at decisions that were happening, and particularly our job wasn't COVID. There were a lot of other people already working on that. And we think, well, how can we help make these decisions better? Our job is to use evidence, to lead to better outcomes. And we would identify the kind of decisions that the Prime Minister and other senior leaders were going to be, making. And, is it going to have very high impact, either social or financial? And we try and pull together all of the evidence and put together a really visual, sort of predictive package that would say, we think that if you make these decisions in combination, we expect the world to look like that. And initially, that was quite hard work. So we'd knock on the door, understand you have a stock take cabinet secretary, can we come in? And sometimes we'd be welcomed in, and quite a lot of the time, whoever we were asking might say, no, go away, I'm already an expert in this field, we don't really need your help. So, it took us a little bit of time, sort of 6 months, a year, to move from being an innovation team that was very much on the outside and trying to do something quite radical, to now being the people that really, the decision makers will come to you first and say, I've got a decision coming up, how can you help make it better? So it's been a very interesting journey sort of through traversing that change, and I think largely it's gone very well. We still have issues, particularly the data sharing across government is not in the place that we'd really like it to be in large pockets. But we work very hard. About 80% of our time is directly supporting the decisions. The other 20 is trying to change the infrastructure of government to make that easier in future. So that's my sort of background in this area.
Laura, thank you very much indeed. Didn't want to stop you in full flow, so what I'm going to do is just introduce the rest of the panel and then turn next to you, Anne. Anne Duncan, thank you for coming over, joining us. Chief Information Officer of Department of Energy in USA. Great to have you, and we've met before out in Ottawa, and I know you've got some fantastic stories to tell. Aditya Udas, again, thank you for joining us. You've come from overseas as Vice President and Head of Digital Sales at Iron Mountain. Delighted to hear what your experiences have been around data innovation and what you're doing next. And Kamal Val, thank you for joining us from the Ministry of Justice. You're Director of Digital, I believe. You've been there several months, so you've got both fresh eyes and experiences to tell. So Laura, you set us off with some real experience and examples, also highlighting some of the challenges that we have ahead of us. And I should say, for those who haven't met me, Alison Pritchard, I'm the Deputy National Statistician, Director General for Data Capability at the Office for National Statistics. I've been around data sharing for quite a while as well. In fact, one of the things I'm trying to do is move us off from this concept of data sharing to the concept of data generous, as in wanting really to use the data that we have more powerfully, ensure others are using the data that we have, not just waiting to be sort of for them to demand it from us. So this concept of data generous, I'm really trying to push forward. Anne, give us your experience out in the States and some of the biggest breakthroughs you've had.
Okay, yeah, thanks again for having us here. It's always wonderful to come over and see many of the same people we visited with in Canada last year. So we're going to I'm going to talk a little bit about how we're leveraging data as a catalyst for transformation. And I want to tell you a little bit about first what we do at the Department of Energy, because it's not obvious from the name of the organization, which seems counterintuitive. But we do everything from, we actually build nuclear weapons to maintain the stockpile. It's actually, for those of you who live here, if you know AWE, we sort of do the same thing they do. So in that space, we build propulsion for nuclear submarines. We work on non-proliferation. The next sort of big chunk of what we do is we do what we call power marketing. So there are folks in the U.S. government, Tennessee Valley Authority, the Army Corps of Engineers who generate power. Our job is we sell that power to power companies. So we also run the grid in 35 states of the United States. So substantial role keeping the grid up and running. Then third, the thing that you probably heard the most about the Department of Energy, we have 17 national labs. They do everything from, and this is where I'm supposed to do the clicker, which I've, oh, these are sort of out of order from what I want, but I get to play with the clicker, so. Oh no, I don't have the lab slide. I thought I had the lab slide, never mind. We're just gonna go on the fly. So we do everything from the 17 national labs, everything from open science, all the way to, again, nuclear security. So it's a broad range of labs. If you think we don't do it, that you're probably wrong. They do research in pretty much everything. So the next thing that I was going to mention is something that I talked about a little bit for this much smaller group we had in Canada last year. We have what we call our Scaling IT Modernization Playbook. And that is designed as a resource to help people do just that, to learn how to go from small modernization projects to large. We built this playbook collaboratively with folks across the U.S. government and also outside the government. And the key was we just asked a lot of people what they thought and got their input and discovered that the plays that we came up with were much better than the plays that we had originally. So in interest of not talking forever, I'm just going to, oh, look, and there's the slide I was talking about before. Someone was kind enough to advance that. So that's all our labs. These were in a different order than I remembered. So, and I thought there were only two. So I'm doing very well. I'm going to call jet lag on that one. But let's go back to the playbook. Have you guys taken over the clicker from, there we go, thank you. They've taken the clicker away from me now. They're like, no, you can't handle the clicker. But this is, we just wanted to point out one of our plays, which is fast-track data adoption, because it's relevant to this. I know that some of you guys were looking at that while I was talking, which of course is why you don't put slides with lots of words up, because everyone sits and reads the words while you talk. But basically, the goal of that play is really to help people understand how to best use data in a digital transformation. So that's just one example from our playbook. And then, advance, you took it away. Yeah, there you go. And then this just talks about the foundations to that and the considerations for it. We have, like I said, there are 10 plays in the playbook. You can find it on our website, which is energy.gov/CIO if you want to investigate it more. But it's just a great opportunity for us to share something tangible and useful that helps people to move forward in their data adoption. So with that, I'm going to yield my time.
Thank you. And a quick follow-up actually on that, which is, of your playbook measures, is there one that really stands out as being the high impact, this would make a difference for everyone?
I'm sorry,
So from your playbook measures that you listed, was there one particular measure that you feel really has large impact and worth focusing on?
I think that the biggest thing is the not so much a measure, but it's understanding why you're collecting data, right? It's that what's the value of the data we're collecting? Who's going to use it? Why did we collect it? To me, that's the most important. And sorry, we've got a little echo going between us.
Yeah, not brilliant acoustics. Thank you very much. We'll come back to questions after we've gone through the panel. Aditya, what's the story from your perspective and developments? How can you help us make more effective use of our data?
Yep. First, thanks for having me. It's always great to be back in this great city. Feels much more like home than New York does, and home being India, although we traveled many years ago, but it's great to be here. Two questions that I do want to answer is, what's a sales guy doing on stage? So I'll try and justify that with a brief introduction. And the second thing is, you asked me, what are we seeing and why Iron Mountain, and what is our position on innovation and data with government services. So brief background, I used to be a software developer, computer science undergrad, wrote software for a while, got my master's, went into management consulting, and now I get to build and grow a business, right? Some of it think of it as a really cool thing to do. I call it penance for my time in consulting when I told all my clients that change was hard, so I live it now. It's fascinating. I've spent my entire life in CDO advisory, data strategy, data governance frameworks, and that brought me to Iron Mountain. Iron Mountain, for those of you that don't know of us, we're a 72-year-old company that started out as a mushroom farm in upstate New York. The founder was an entrepreneur, and when the mushroom trade went a different direction, he thought of using his farms and his land for data storage. So this was immediately after the Second World War. There were a bunch of Jewish immigrants, coming to the state of New York, and their files were in danger of being destroyed, and their identity being potentially wiped out. So storing of that identity and storing of history and culture is the foundation of Iron Mountain. And where we are today is we're in the Fortune 1000. We supply information management services to every single government institution, state, federal, local, across the globe for most parts. We serve 95% of the Fortune 1000, and math should be easy in this room, so that's 950 Fortune 1000 companies. We provide services, end-to-end services across the entire information management lifecycle, right? So we have a data center business, we have an asset lifecycle management business that ties very closely with the data center business, which is responsible for the decommissioning of technology assets. We have our core records and information management business, where I'm sure a lot of you have either gone into an Iron Mountain facility or used one to store your physical records, retrieve them, archive them in accordance with specific policy. And then we have the digital business unit, which is responsible for carrying that that chain of custody, the archival, the retention, the deletion of physical content in the digital space to aid with digital transformation as we move along this paperless route. So that's, and all of the trends and nuances that we're seeing are related to storing large volumes of data at scale to solve very specific business problems. So, that's kind of what I will be talking about.
Thank you. Interesting to hear more about that as we go into questions. Kamal, you've got your fan base in the front row. So, tell us about innovation in data in MOJ, and we work alongside on quite a lot of activity, so I know you're doing some great stuff.
Indeed, yeah, thank you. Firstly, thank you for having me. Full disclosure, Richard Price was supposed to be doing this session, but at relatively short notice, he was asked to attend number 10, so I was asked to stand in, so I do have my cheat sheet of notes if you see me peeking down at them.
No problem.
For those who know Richard is a highly eloquent, engaging chap, but so number 10's gain is your loss, I'm afraid, because you're all stuck with me today. As you point out, Alison, I've only been in the civil service of the MOJ for 2 months now, so it's been very interesting coming from 20 years in the private sector, but I can already see how we are using data and technology to revolutionize the experiences that we put out there in front of our fellow citizens in the world of justice. There's one program or one initiative in particular I know Richard would want me to talk about because he actually sponsors it and does a great job leading it, which is called the BOLD initiative. So BOLD stands for Better Outcomes from Linked Data. And it's a MOJ-led but a cross-government department initiative, which is really aimed at, Laura articulates beautifully, that we struggle to get data out of our silos within our own systems, but then in particular within our departments. But this is aimed at trying to break that down and working to share that data. So today, for example, it's the Department for Health and Social Care, the Department for Levelling of Housing and Communities, and the Government of Wales that all come together. But what's really beautiful is how they go about doing this, because they do then operate as one team. They've got some objectives. They operate as one team of analysts, policy experts, strategists, etc. But really the beauty is that they're showing how if we do work together, if we have that common aim, we are able to forge agreements on how we can share data, leading to some great outcomes. It was most notably or recently recognized in the Analysis in Government Awards. It was highly commended for the work it had done, particularly in investigating the pathway from people interacting with justice systems through to how they receive treatment for drug abuse and drug care. I mean, how they're doing it, it involves, again, a great amount of brains, but they fundamentally at the heart of it is how they can take large sets of administrative data and bring it together, also overcoming technology, legal, process challenges, but bringing all of that data together to really drive those outcomes that we seek for our fellow citizens. Talking about large data sets as well, it would be remiss not to talk about the data linking team, who at the same Analysis in Government Awards won the prestigious People's Award for the work that they've done. They've created a new application called Splink. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but Splink is a novel open source data linking application, but it uses what they call probabilistic linking. It uses laws of probability, is my understanding, to link data to help remove duplication, etc. The real proof in the pudding of the success of this is that it's not just used in the MOJ, but it's used by other departments. It's used by the ONS, I believe, as one of their core libraries. It's used by other agencies. It's used by universities in the UK and the US, and also the private sector. It's been downloaded over 3 million times. So this is an indication of some of the exciting things that are emerging from within the MOJ. So, yeah, as I said, start out with, we're seeing it's not an ethereal philosophical conversation. We're seeing some real tangible outputs through the application of this data sharing in terms of what we are able to offer to our citizens, and our aspirations is to see how quickly and how far we can go with it.
Kamal, thank you. And I think there's, thanks everyone for being nice and concise, and plenty of time for questions. You know how it works, microphone will go around. There's some interesting themes which you've all given examples of where we are doing this now. And, having been around data sharing for long enough, we were talking about the art of the possible some time ago. Now we're getting into the art of this is what we're doing. And the kind of the onus on all of us here in the room and on the panel is, how do we then scale what we're doing and do this with less friction than possibly we have in the model at the moment? So whilst people are thinking about the questions they want to ask, can I just draw on that question, which is, how do we scale what that currently is working well? And Laura, can I start down the end?
Scaling is always a challenge, particularly when you've got something like a government that's many disparate, very siloed organisations with different incentives to work together, or arguably not always work together. I think that so much of the scaling in this environment that's different to kind of an industry environment is about the culture and the way we incentivize people to sort of engage with new systems. When it comes to data sharing in particular, and the kind of data sharing technology we use, we tend to run into a few different problems. So, we're still existing in a world where people are largely sharing data via email. Most of the data that we come in by default is going to be a CSV or an Excel file. There is one group that sends us a screenshot of a table on a regular basis. And changing that's obviously very important to making a more efficient and effective system. But what we found is just going in and telling people that they need to start building APIs is wildly ineffective. Firstly, they might not feel like they particularly want to. It might sound like a lot of work. And secondly, they don't know how. So what we do a lot with the way that we try to scale things is, firstly, in the case of data sharing, we've built a free, lightweight, open source, on GitHub, very simple API system that you can stick on cloud infrastructure. You know, there's a data repository, it reads in, it reads out in the normal way. You can access it programmatically, but there's also crucially a user interface for people that can't do that, where they can drag and drop their CSV files. And we'll just go out, we'll install it, you know, in different departments, we'll quickly teach people how to use it, and it's designed to be easy, and we go, you know, there's the technological problem solved for you. And that quite rapidly brings data sharing, you know, into a slightly modern space. But the other thing is really that culture thing of making people want to use that. And that's about moving from a paradigm, I think, where data people are not necessarily very important. It's seen as like quite a backroom, you know, analysts off in the corner, and then perhaps a policy person or a decision maker or somebody senior will sort of take the fruits of your work and benefit. We really try and build a culture where the analyst is in the room with a decision maker, and whoever's generated the data is there informing people, and try and bring that spotlight on the hard work that people are doing. And we particularly try and sort of teach ministers how to ask better questions from their analysts and their data people, and how to engage with how you get evidence into your decisions. For where I'm sitting, most of it's cultural and changing the way people appreciate and work with data, and everything else flows from that. I don't think that's true of industry, I've got to say, but that's from my perspective where we are.
You draw upon a couple of really important points around foundational work and getting their foundations right. I'm always a little worried that the word culture kind of masks an awful lot of foundational elements, that it's easy to lump into that. But, I mean, Anne, I'll either answer the question about scaling, or do you feel you've done all the work that's necessary on the foundational elements? Have we got to learn from you?
Absolutely not, and I think we can carry that culture thread a little bit forward. I think our biggest challenge, and I described the size of the enterprise that we're dealing with, but maybe not fully. You know, we're talking somewhere, and it's funny, we don't actually know for sure how many employees we have, which sounds crazy, but because of the composition of our employees, we have federal employees and then lab employees, and it's kind of, but you know, we think it's around somewhere between 150 and 200,000 employees. A lot of people working on a lot of stuff. And the challenge is how do we know what we have? It's not even, we're not even at the how do we share it yet. It's how do we know what we have? How do we create the indexing opportunity for that, the data discovery, the metadata, so that we can even have a conversation with each other about what there is. And we further complicate that, which again, this is more of a government problem, but we have classified information. Now, most private sector companies don't have that problem, but they certainly have the other part of the problem we have is even on the unclassified side, we have more sensitive and less sensitive information. So how do I create that metadata? How do I determine who gets to see that? And oh, by the way, to take that back to the culture, how do I get people to let me? Because so many of them are like, oh, this is my data. And you know, we have 17 national labs. They compete against each other for work. They're private sector companies, and they compete for work within our enterprise. So there are at times a disincentive to share that data because, wait, some other lab might get some work based on the data that we had. So it's you know, just being able to figure out what we have, where we have it, and how to share it is a huge problem for us.
Thank you. Aditya, often from the outside, you get a better view of public sector and what's occurring across the piece. In your experience, whether it's UK or globally, are we missing a trick? Are there things we should be doing that we could be doing better?
I don't know about missing a trick, but you know, both Anne and Laura talked about foundational stuff, right? So and you touched upon it also. I think the role that Iron Mountain plays is in making large volumes of data available so that you can make decisions based on that. And the philosophy that we use is the foundational work is actually identifying what the taxonomy is right up front, right? So saying that what is the business problem you're trying to solve for with this data, what part of this data has value and what doesn't, and then using our digitization techniques or our data management techniques at scale, you can actually sort through large volumes of data. If you have the taxonomy to assert it to, you know, and extract the right metadata, then that works in a very efficient manner. But what we've seen and what we do is, you know, we use, like, what we do is make data available, and we use innovation and robotics in actual digitization, and we use a very specific document processing framework from end to end, which uses large language models, deep machine learning and AI to actually extract information at scale, so you don't have to, there aren't human beings actually looking at the document and saying, yes, this looks like a driver's license, yes, this looks like a social security number. That's all built algorithmically, and the foundational aspect for that is the actual taxonomy, right? So once you have a couple of things in place, it kind of works in a seamless manner.
I mean, that reminds me, again, back to the point about foundational elements.
Yep.
Having a visibility across government data as an enterprise data model, for instance, and something that the Integrated Data Service mentioned by Adam in Google earlier, which I'm SRO for, is attempting to link data at scale by indexing consistently.
Yep.
And that's something that's fairly new for us to do. So Kamal, has BOLD really forced you to address some foundational elements along the way?
Yeah, completely. I think one of the challenges, though, is when we jump to scale, it's quite an intimidating concept, isn't it? There's so much that I think stops it. It can easily intimidate us and prevent us from doing anything. So I've actually, my counsel would almost be for anyone, everyone's probably in a different partnership, but just start by doing something and learn from it. And some of the smaller examples we've got in my own remit is just where we're literally just trying to talk to one, like we've got, a probation system trying to talk to a court system, or we've got the LAA talking to HMRC, just as a more simple beginning, because we're also relying on things like that piece of work that's going on as an enabler for us. There's no point in us trying to create some thing that's going to scale for the whole of government. We're relying on government to try and break some of those boundaries or lay some of those foundations that we can take advantage of. But that comes to a second point, which is also just be constantly curious, constantly looking left and right. I think, again, certainly in the area I've walked into, we're guilty of trying to recreate the wheel quite often when there are capabilities like Splink or like these are the things that are out there. So just make sure you're curious, make sure you go and investigate what is there to help you.
We're guilty sometimes of not being curious. We're also guilty sometimes of looking for the next big exciting thing and forgetting some of the stuff we're trying to do. And a year ago, I can guarantee, we'll check the tapes, large language models probably weren't mentioned once at this kind of conference. There is a danger that we think, great, all we've got to do is wait for that next step, when actually there's a lot of work we can and still need to do to make some of the stuff work. Questions from the audience? Who would like? We've had lots of stuff emerge already. Any questions? Yeah, we've got someone in the middle there. Mike's just on its way to you. Question may or may not come to everyone. We'll see how we get them.
Hi, I'm Stephen from the Department of Health. It's sort of a question on how do you balance the benefits of sort of centralizing data against the risks of that? So, for example, with a lot of the work I do, it's really useful to use ONS census level data, but to access that, I have to go down to Pimlico, I have to go into a secure room, I then have to take it out through an IG process. I then want to combine that with NHS data, so I have to go into an NHS environment, IG process. Obviously, it'd be beneficial for me if those two systems were together, but obviously having those two data systems together, both of them are probably security risks, and sort of putting them together is, you're exponentially raising the risk in effect. And I mean, how do you balance those two, that need versus the risk?
Great question, actually. Right at the heart of, I think, the next big developments are on our data architecture and our technical architecture that plays to. And all the points you've just made are in train, because we recognize we can't continue in the way you've just described, but it's going to take a lot of breakthroughs in the way that we work across boundaries. But, everyone on the panel will have views on that, I'm sure. Let's, rather than go straight to, let's start this end for a change. Kamal.
It may not answer your question directly, but I generally, in all of these conversations, I come back to the effort-reward matrix, where I'll quite simply try and plot, is it low to high effort and is it low to high reward? And ideally, you find things that are in the low effort, high reward space, and you start from there. If not, again, it depends where you are on the spectrum. If you're doing nothing, start in the low effort, low reward, just to start to build that momentum, start to see something happening. Equally, at some point, you might choose, right, I'm going to go after the big hairy thing over here, which is the high effort, high reward. You've raised a great point. Now, there's so many different versions of data, or what you consider data. Anything that involves, yes, that identifiable, more secret, very personal data, we have to be incredibly careful with what we do with it. But maybe don't start there. Maybe try and start with somewhere where you can use anonymized data, or you can use data that's not going to give that away, just to start to learn and prove your concepts.
I think that the risk model is biased towards, understandably, security. I'm not sure we pay enough attention to the risk of not using the data to save lives or in making improvements.
No, that's the point I was trying to make. I was going to make, which is, that there has to be, what is your risk appetite and what is the outcome you're trying to drive through it. And I like to use, and we do this very often, I like to use the concept of a business case, right? So what am I going to get? What is my largest amount of risk that I'm undertaking, and what is the largest, to Kamal's point, what is the largest amount of reward that can be driven through what I'm trying to do? We also, you can solve these problems infrastructurally, you can solve these problems through policy and procedure and standards, right? Especially with personal information, as the way that GDPR and the CCPA defines it, there is very specific ways on how you govern that. So, and technology is getting built to allow us to manage that data in a very specific way. It's the rest of the, and as far as personal information is concerned, it captures almost everything about a human being, right? It's the fringe data that we don't really know how to govern or how to manage, and I think that's where the risk lies. I would do the same thing. I would use a risk-reward framework and see what I'm going to get out of it.
Thank you. And you talked about sort of 17 labs, and therefore, presumably, you have to address the question of architecture to make that work. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a couple thoughts. One is I think goes back to that business case. What's the value of bringing that data together? So I've got, an example that we have an oversight body that wanted to collect a ton of very personal data from people, and they were looking for someone doing something wrong. And so our take on it was, we don't really want to give you all this data, put it all together, create a massive security risk by sticking all this data in a database, just so you can look and see if somebody's done something wrong. It's probably not a good choice. On the other hand, when I was working for a county, we were trying to pull together data from our hospital, data from our law enforcement, and other data from the social services to try and do some profiling to identify people at risk. But what we discovered was when we figured out all the laws, if we put all that data together in a database, there's no one who could look at the data, because under different laws, different people had access. There was no one who had access to the healthcare data and the law enforcement data together. So that is the opposite problem, right? Useful data that we can't bring together because legally it's not possible. So I think, when I go back, my biggest point I think of though is going back to the idea of pulling the metadata together. So maybe you're not going to get the data together in a room, but maybe we can get the metadata together that gives you the roadmap that tells you, oh, I want to go get this data and dig in more deeply, or you can do some analytics without actually pulling all the data together in a database. So you can go from a central point and query that data, query the database, and the data sets without actually pulling it all together in one place. Because I do think, depending upon the data, we do introduce tremendous risks. And I don't really want to be the person who brought a whole bunch of personal data together and then lost it. That's sort of not high on my list of experiences I want to have in my life. So I think looking for ways to actually not bring the data together if it's sensitive, but still be able to use it, I think is a good solution to the problem.
Laurie, you're part of the center, a center. You rely on data flows. What would you like to see change?
Well, obviously, actually, Alison is the expert in this as she's running the integrated data service, which is hoping to overcome a lot of these problems. I think my perspective, I agree with you very strongly about the risk of not doing anything. Now, obviously, the risk of leaking somebody's health data connected to their tax record is very, very high, and we shouldn't be venturing into space where we could do that. But I always use an analogy to medicine. If you go ahead and you scan somebody and you get all their medical records, and there is information there that tells you that if you don't do something in 6 months, they're going to die, and you don't use that information, you're negligent. It's a bad thing to do to people. Well, in the government, in the various parts of it, we pull together a very great deal of pertinent information about the health of individuals in different ways and the economy at large. And what we largely assess people on is, have there been any catastrophes? Now, if you've got your data and there's been no catastrophe with that data, you're sort of in the winning position. And I think we need to change that paradigm a bit, because what we should be saying is, your data has value. Have you buried it under a rock? Or have you gone and realized that value? And that would be a great way to assess if somebody's doing well. At the moment, we don't really incentivize that. I would like to incentivize people to be looking for the cancer and curing it with their data, not just saying, my data is entirely secure, I've hidden it in a box under a rock, no one knows it's there, and therefore I haven't incurred any reputational damage. So I would very much like to change the paradigm we currently operate in, and I think that the work that you're doing will hopefully go a long way to helping us do that.
Thank you. And I think a really, really good question underpinning what's occurring at the moment. And one of the ways we can short circuit or make progress is the concept of what we describe as integrated data assets. So a thematic data set to tackle climate change, net zero, health, etc., where it forces our hand to look beyond single silos. That will take different type of governance, take different type of architecture, but I think that will help us make progress towards the point you're making, Laura. Thank you. Was there a question from this side? Yep, sorry, we're just on the aisle on this side. And then I'll come to you.
Hi, I'm Taiwo Ross from Companies House. I've actually got 2 questions and I'm struggling. Which one should I ask? I'll go for the one that has a slightly bigger context. The question is, how do you build a case for linking public sector data with private sector data when the outcome is for the global good, like climate change? Just to give you an example, you have energy companies that provide cheap energy to charge electric vehicles, and you have data with councils, parking spaces and things like that. So the app led me to a parking space where I could charge, but it turned out it was a residence-only parking space, and it wasn't indicated there. And I thought, if the app had told me that, obviously I wouldn't go there. There's a disjoin there. So how do you build a case for joining public sector data with private sector data where there's a common interest like climate change? You're trying to sell the case for EVs, clean energy, and stuff like that. So probably for you, Anne.
Okay, well, thank you. It's a fascinating question, and a lot of how we do that in the United States is by making a lot of public sector data public. So we're unlikely to go the other direction and say, bring private sector data in. There are some cases where we do, for example, in regulatory situations, we'll be pulling private sector data in and using that along with data we have gathered either through academic research or government work and doing analysis. But then the challenges are republishing that. Often that's medical data and things like that. And it gets very complicated about how to republish that. And there's a whole bunch of controversy about doing regulation when you don't publish the underlying data. So let's probably should step away from the government using private data and just say, we publish lots of data. The US government does, academic institutions do, and the goal of that is to encourage the private sector data to take our data and combine that with their data sets as well, and so that we can make this robust ecosystem of data through their use. We will internally, like I said, primarily use our data and university data, anything that is public and not private, because it gets complicated for us. But there's actually a site called data.gov that has loads of data about the U.S. government and access to data sets from the U.S. government, so people can go grab that data and then apply it, whether it's to academic research or to private sector activities, completely, obviously, free of charge because the public paid for it, so we make it available back to the public. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Anyone else want to come in on that? One point I think I will make is that we are already, many of us, combining private sector data with public sector data and merging. So I wouldn't want anyone to get the impression that it needs to be difficult or it should be complex building the case. And therein will be an awful lot of power when we utilize the data in that fashion. So let's share knowledge on how we can do that. We may have time for one more question, I suspect. Would you still like to ask your question at the front? Microphone this way.
Thank you. James Shepherd, Technical Architect at Government Digital Service. I thought of this in the earlier session about artificial intelligence. So I was just wondering what the panel's thoughts are on relying on artificial intelligence to clean up poor quality or unstructured data versus educating people to change existing processes and improve the quality of data gathered in the first place.
What a great last question, I think, was worked through from the end. And you're going to have loads to say, Aditya, I'm sure.
Yeah, I do.
Go on, actually, I'm going to invite you to go first.
No, we can start from there.
No, Okay,
Go ahead.
Laura.
I mean, there's got to be a place for both of those things, really, haven't there? I mean, I suppose we covered in the previous session, I think a lot of people would prefer that we think about artificial intelligence as a tool, and in my case, it's a tool that often needs hand-holding. So what you would like to be doing an awful lot of is having the algorithm come up with a recommendation for how you should clean your data, and perhaps, and we do this already, you know, and certainly in sort of finance and medical tech, you would get an algorithm that cleans your data and highlights and asks you to confirm, is this the way you want to clean it? And you'll clean in different ways according to what you use the data from. Am I interested in the outliers? Am I not interested in the outliers? So I don't think it's really an either or, and I don't think it's something that you can really, unless you're very clear about your use case and you've built something and tested it repeatedly, you can't usually just replace a human and go, algorithm, go clean this. And I don't think we'd safely move into a world where that was the case for really quite a long time either. So I'm hoping that the kind of renewed and much greater interest in artificial intelligence gives us a lot more hooks to try and teach people a bit more about data and what you can do with it and what's sort of a safe use and what's an unsafe use. And it gives you real life examples of how, if you rely on data in the wrong way, bad things happen. It's a very, very good training tool to teach the general public. When I do this with data, bad thing happens. So I think this is two sides of the same coin, and will hopefully speed up progress in this place, personally. I've been wrong before, though, so.
And lessons from the States.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm with you. We need to do better with how we collect data. We can use AI to clean up data. We all know that AI is only as reliable as the training it gets, so we need to be really clear that we are doing it right, but it's certainly an option. But I think I always prefer for us to collect the data right in the first place. And I understand now we've got old data sets that you got to deal with, and this may be a solution. But I wouldn't, what I would hate to have anyone take out of this is, oh, don't worry about collecting your data right. Just AI will fix it all for you in the back end.
Brilliant. Aditya, how frightened should we be of the digital heap? Is it mostly just pictures of cats?
No, let me try and first kind of quickly try and break that problem and that question down into two pieces, right? The way that we see it, and we do this, maybe, our digital business unit does this, 85% of what we do is exactly what you talked about. There just aren't enough humans in the world to solve the problem thematically for what we call backfile. So backfile data, which is stored either in, film, fiche, physical paper, tape, physical forms that have not been digitized yet. There just aren't enough human beings in the world to actually to digitize all of the information, classify it, index it, extract what's relevant, and then store it in the right way. So technology has to play a part. Whether it's AI/ML or it's heuristics or it's like some basic data science, we can all argue. But there is no way that we're solving the digitization at scale problem without AI/ML. So that's our hypothesis, and we don't even call it dealing with unstructured data, right? We think of it as solving a communications problem. You're trying to make sure that information that needs to go from one system or one application or one source to the other is being transmitted the right way. So that's how we look at backfile. Day forward data, which is data being generated today, data being generated in the future. I think that goes back to your point where collect the data right at the source, have the right controls, have the right governance framework, make sure you have lineage, make sure you have the right rules, which allow you to capture the data, throw the exception when it's required. But even then, right, you need to build those, you need to build exceptions. You need to have the right rules that prevent capturing erroneous data. We do use a process which is called human in the loop, which actually goes through physical data and tries to earmark it and make sure that we're extracting the right information. We're trying desperately to reduce our dependence on the human in the loop concept and use technology more and more as we try and scale this. Great. So it's a really good question.
Great insight, thank you. And Kamal,
it really just echoes. I'm a huge proponent of just being efficient and getting people to, if the technology can do it for us, I'm a huge proponent of doing that. But as everyone said, we'd be foolhardy just to dive straight into throwing it all and letting AI do everything for us. There is certainly, in my view, there's still a human element that is needed even if it's to validate at the end of it. It comes back to the conversation we also had about risk. Some people might have a bigger appetite for risk and be willing to. Others are going to be more risk averse and will probably choose to use less of it. Again, I think I love the concept. I love how efficient it could make us. I love some of the mundane tasks that it will take away from us and allow us to use our brains for more exciting things I think everyone wants to do in their job. So it's really interesting, probably next 12, 18 months
Right.
is about to emerge.
I know GovUK is doing some great work in that space, so that's great. I think it's my job to bring this to an end. Thanks ever so much for the engagement, really good questions. Quick round of applause, please, if we can, for the panel, Laura and Aditya and Kamal. And enjoy the rest of the day. Thanks very much.